What is going on, people? We are Tottenham TV here, back with some more Unpopular Opinions, episode 3 of the Unpopular Opinions for you guys. You guys know what time it is, so let's get straight into it. And that first one up, we're going to be talking about is Alfie Bond. He says, without Daniel Levy and his extremely long-term plans / projects for the club, there's a good chance we would have been relegated once or twice in the last 20 years. Do you reckon without Daniel Levy, Spurs would have been under threat of relegation?
I do.
You do?
Yes. So I said in a previous video how, when I was a kid, Everton were a bigger club than Spurs. Aston Villa were better than Spurs when I was a kid. And over the period of time of that 20 years, I can look at clubs like Middlesbrough, who were doing better than us at various times. All these kind of clubs who have been relegated, I think, in terms of when Daniel Levy took over at Tottenham Hotspur, which was what, 2003?
2001.
2001, and then, but wasn't it like 2001, but David Buchler was the chairman, and then he took over as chairman properly in 2003. But okay, Enoch took it over in 2001. In those previous seasons, the late 90s, we were relegation fodder, close to getting relegated time and time again. And I think he kind of slowly has set the wheels in motion and got the kind of club built up to a point where, had he not put in those places, I think, like Villa, for instance, we would have been in the Championship maybe at some point.
Well, we have seen other clubs. Newcastle have been relegated a couple of times. As you say, Villa have been relegated once. So maybe there's a case for... I don't know if we ever would have been relegated, because as much as we flirted with it a couple of times. There was one, I remember one time we were seriously in danger of it when Klinsmann saved us.
Yeah, late 90s.
That was in the late 90s. I don't think we ever got into a situation come the final run into the season, there was ever really a real possibility we would have got relegated. I think, obviously, look, Levy has done great in terms of where the club is at now compared to where it took it over and that long-term project. We all know the criticisms of Daniel Levy at certain moments. Could he have pushed the boat out a little, gone that extra mile?
Well, sorry to drop, but actually Hugo Lloris in his interview this week has said that when the Pochettino team was at its best, they needed 2 or 3 big signings to really push that over the line. So that's another... I mean, most people I think are talking about the Louis Saha, Ryan Nelson time.
Those kind of things,
But I think actually maybe Lloris's point is a bit more relevant.
That's interesting, because at that point, we had a great team, but then we always added players who never quite made an impact in Kudu and G, these kind of players who were never going to improve us and take us to that next level.
Did you hear the story? Did you hear that rumor about Paul Mitchell and the French players?
No.
So if you remember, Paul Mitchell was our sporting director at the time, and apparently he was getting... The reason that he lost his job at Spurs was he was... Allegedly, this is very allegedly, but apparently it was something to do with those French signings and some kind of financial element towards that. So that's always what I heard.
Maybe too much criticism for Levy then. But I have to admit, and right now, in terms of where the club is at, what a strong position we're in from an FFP standpoint, since that's been kicking in. The fact that we're now a club which good young players like Dragoshin and Bergvall are looking at us saying, actually, I'd rather be part of that project than joining, quote unquote, bigger clubs like Bayern Munich and Barcelona. I think Levy definitely does deserve credit for that. And I think if you're gonna, bash him for the fact that we haven't won a trophy in 16 years and it's only been one trophy at all in his tenure, no FA Cup since 91, all these different things, which I think are fair criticisms, then you also got to give him credit for the club being in a very strong position that it is right now. But we have to take advantage of that, and I think we are, and I hope that we continue to do so. But I have to say, I'm very excited with where the club is heading and the direction we're going, and in terms of the whole project of the club. This is I don't know if this is what Levy envisioned from when he took over, but in terms of how he's acted and where we are now, it does seem to be the plans he has set in motion coming to fruition.
Yeah, and I also think it's worth saying that in any other era of football, if Tottenham had grown in the same way, Tottenham would have won 2 or 3 championships. I really like 2 or 3 Premier League titles, because it just so happens that in this 20-year era of Daniel Levy growing the club to where it's got to now, it has coincided with Abramovich taking over Chelsea, cheating, and State taking over, Abu Dhabi taking over Manchester City, and it looks like they're going to be done for cheating as well. So the reality is it's just been unfortunate on that front. But yes, that's not me taking away from the fact we should have won some trophies. Of course we should have done. But it's been a hell of a ride as well.
Definitely. Terry Rizzo said, sell both Kulu and Johnson in the summer and buy an A-grade right winger who can actually take on his fullback. I don't know. Look, I understand he's saying sell both of them. Johnson, in his first 7 months, I still think clearly has a lot of improving to do. I think everyone could agree on that. I still think I see some positive things, but definitely of late he's been frustrating me quite a bit. In terms of Decky, I don't think you need to sell him. You can just move his position. I think he'd be a versatile option. But if I told you we could sell both of those players and buy, I don't know, a Nico Williams and a Neto, would that be an acceptable piece of business?
No, not for me. Not for me. I think Brennan Johnson is a kid. You know, he's played a lot more games than anyone would have expected him to have to at Spurs this season so far. He is raw, but he's got talent. And as you said, I agree with you in that Kulusevski can play more as a 10 and can be a backup for Maddison. I haven't seen a lot of Nico Williams. He looks really good. He does look really good. The ones that I am interested in, and it's really a matter of the reality with Spurs, as it always is, you know, are the teams above us, by which I mean financially above us, the teams who are willing to pay the wages and the transfer fees. So I'm talking about Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea, and now that Arsenal have broken that 100 million barrier for Declan Rice to them. Which players will be left, i.e. from not being bought by those clubs, from Eze, Elise, Neto? They're the ones that I'm interested in because they've all done it in the Premier League, so no acclimatization time. Which are going to be left? Which clubs do you think will go in for those players in the summer? I think they'll all leave this summer. I
think there's a good chance as well. Although Glasner are now coming to signing at Palace, will that convince them to stay for one more season? I think Elise suffers maybe from a bit of a similar issue to Neto, the fact that he's so great, but he seems to consistently pick up injuries. Eze is an interesting one because I love Eze. I think he's an unbelievable player, so underrated. But is he now more of a number 10 than a winger? I feel like maybe that's his best position now. So I don't know if we want to sign him to play on the wing, or I think he can be a good winger, but I feel like he sees himself more as number 10. That's where he plays consistently for Palace now. And he's going to be, you know, a big money signing. So do we need to sign a big money signing to play number 10? I don't know. That's what leaves Neto for me. I love Neto so much, but yeah, I agree. Whatever one's left, I'm
City
happy.
Love buying off Wolves, don't they? They've taken that what's his name, Nunes. Yeah. So I could see City just hoovering up. I wonder if City might end up losing Jack Grealish this summer. He's not getting much game time. So if they were to sell, if Grealish came to City, because what City do is they let players go if they say they want to leave. They're like, yeah, we'll let you go. So if Grealish goes to Pep and says, I want more game time, and he leaves, then I could see them hoovering up Neto. And they already tried to get Elise last summer, didn't they? I
think them and Chelsea both were really in for him. Destiny with a Twist says, not that one. Ivan Pio says, Tottenham has one of the worst game control in the Premier League. That I think definitely we are very open. I think right now anyway. I think the first 10 games we weren't as open as we are right now, although we were still fairly open. We're not as open now, so it's definitely a bit of an issue. But in terms of just having control of the game, it does seem like since those 10 games, even in games where we've played well, like had good performances, apart from maybe like a thing off the top of my head, like the Newcastle game, we have really struggled to like maintain control for sustained periods of time in the game. We've had periods. I remember in that Brentford game, you know, we had that 20-minute period where we blitzed them. In the Brighton game, we had like a half an hour period where we controlled it and, you know, got back in the game. But why do you think it is we just struggle to maintain control of games right now?
I think we're really struggling in the final third to keep pressure on the opposition, and we're always looking, I say this a lot in the watch-alongs, we're always looking for that kind of paradise ball, like the dream ball, first or second touch. We're not keeping much momentum. I mean, the flip side of that though is, you know, if you watch back that Wolves game, I think during the Wolves game we all felt like we had no control over the game because every time they won the ball off us they were in, right? That's how it felt. But actually, if you watch it back, you'll see we had like 70% possession. It was just slow possession. And I don't think we're kind of counting that. So to me, it goes back to when we get in the final third, we don't hold the ball well enough, we don't make enough chance, we don't have enough shots, and then it comes back at us quite quickly, and there's always space in behind our fullbacks. So that's why it doesn't feel like we're in control of the game. But I think these games against these low block teams, especially at our place, are very different to even when you play away against low block teams, because the crowd draws them on a bit more even. So I think we'll see games coming up maybe after the Palace game where we feel like we're kind of getting more momentum and more control of the game.
So now Destiny with a twist. He says, I'm worried about Ange's talent, winger talent ID.
Right.
Is there a case for that? Because you look at our team right now, the wingers that he has brought into the club since he's come in is Manor Solomon, Brennan Johnson, Timo Werner. The wingers that generally start are the ones he didn't brought in, Kulusevski and Son. They're the ones he usually goes with. Is there any sort of concern that for some reason he brings in wingers who haven't, maybe done it straight away at the moment?
I think Manor Solomon doesn't really count because he was very much a Tottenham opportunist signing, wasn't he? He was like, we can get this player for free. Very least we're going to make some money on the back end. So
is Werner in the same boat as
I think Werner is similar, an opportunist one where we can get him on loan, and then even if we do buy him as squad depth, it's only 15 million quid. So the only one you're really looking at is Brennan Johnson for me. And Brennan Johnson, as I said before, is for the future. I know people are going to get annoyed with me because they're like, but we spent 45 million pounds. That's what you have to pay for a homegrown player now. Like, that's the reality. 45 million pounds is the new 20 million pounds.
Yeah.
So, he's one for the future. So I think it's too soon to say, Ange is not good at picking wingers. His entire career has been based on having teams who score a lot of goals from out wide. So it'll be interesting to see, like I said, can we get any of those three players over the line, or Neto more specifically, perhaps in the summer? Maybe, let's wait 6 months, 8 months and see what's happening then to kind of judge Ange on that.
Yeah, if we spend big money on another winger in the summer and it doesn't work out, maybe you have a case. But I think for now it's a bit too early. Mo says we should have kept Reguilon and Jed Spence as backups for the second half of the season. Technically, Spence is much better than Royale. Obviously, Spence is out on loan in Genoa at the moment. Apparently, he's picked up some decent reviews from some people are saying he's doing quite well out there. Obviously, we spoke about Reguilon before, but in terms of Jed Spence, should we have kept him? Should he be a backup right back? Would he be a better option than Emerson Royale right now?
I don't think it matters. I think with Big Ange, it's like he's very clear where he wants people who are good for the group. And I think it's clear that Jed Spence, under 2-3 managers now, hadn't got a game for Spurs. And I think there's lots of stories about him potentially being very bad at timekeeping and stuff like that. So, Mo, I wish you were here so we could ask you, how much of Jed Spence have you actually seen? Do you know what I mean? Because I haven't seen any of Jed Spence for Tottenham Hotspur. But he's made a couple of substitute appearances.
That's it, yeah.
And in those...
Has he started one game ever? No, never.
I don't know. Not that I can remember, but in those appearances, have I ever thought, wow, he's really technically gifted? And no, to me, he's quite rangy. He's like a rangy runner. Do you know what I mean? So, look, it's easy. Emerson Royal had a bad game, especially going forward. He lost the ball in some dangerous areas. It's very easy to look back in hindsight and say, I wish we had someone else to play. The player who I wish we still had at the club, Kieran Trippier. Kieran Trippier under Ange would be unbelievable. Like, he'd be unbelievable. And look, there's an argument to say, he only became a good defender because he played for Diego Simeone, and if he'd stayed at Spurs, he wouldn't have had that. But I would say, we kind of hounded Trippier out of the club. He had a bad season running up to that Champions League final. He's come out since, said he was injured all season, playing through injuries. Top player, plays for England every time. Southgate picks him every time. An unbelievable deliverer of a cross and a set piece. So I would say no about Spence. We've talked about Reguilon in a previous episode. Ange didn't think he was capable of playing the position.
It's funny to talk about Trippier because there was rumours of him joining Bayern in January, and I think the fee was like 12 million. And I tweeted something like, I think we should go for that, because I know he's like 32, 33 now, and obviously he's not at his very, very best, but I still think he's playing well enough to like be a backup to Porro. And I think with the way he plays would be perfect for us. And everyone was making fun of me.
He fell out with Levy though, didn't he? He fell out.
Did he?
Yeah, he fell out with Levy. He said he didn't feel like he was treated with respect.
So maybe he'll never come back.
The interesting thing about him being linked with Bayern in January was, like, obviously we heard a lot about Newcastle struggling with the profit and sustainability rules, and they're going to have to sell someone before June the 30th, I think. I think them and Chelsea are in a similar boat. So, expect to hear more rumours of Spurs sniffing around some of their players. Spurs basically sniff around all the clubs who are struggling financially.
They smell blood,
yeah. Smell blood, exactly. But Yeah, it was like Tuchel trying to get the old Spurs band back together. Dyer, Kane and Trippier all about, and now Tuchel's lost his job as well.
Spurs FTBL says Mickey van der Ven is going to be a bigger legend than Ledley King. I mean, after 6 months of seeing Mickey van der Ven, that's quite a prediction. But if you got your crystal ball out, what do you reckon?
Well, I'm going to give my unpopular opinion here. I can see Mickey van der Ven playing for Real Madrid or someone.
You reckon he won't last the distance at Tottenham?
I could see Mickey van der Ven getting a big move in maybe 3-4 years' time. He's young, isn't he?
22.
So he'll be 26, and he's just got, unless, I'm really pleased that since he's come back from his hamstring injury, he's still got that raw pace. So unless he has a hamstring injury that loses that pace, he could do anything he wants in the game. I think he's an unbelievable centre-half, incredibly talented, takes on responsibility really well. And I could see, if money gets back into Spain, they haven't really got big money to buy players from the Premier League anymore, but I could see him going, maybe even running his contract down. That's what a lot of these big players are doing now, isn't it? They're running their contract down. They're not scared of the danger of being injured because they get insurance against that. And I can't see Mickey van der Ven being a legend like Ledley because Ledley was a one-club man. So no, but only because he's too good.
That's fair enough. Roast Cocoa Pops says, Sarr is our most important player on the pitch. I think a lot of people have that opinion because we were struggling at one point, and then Sarr came back in the team, and we all of a sudden looked very, very good. And he seems to be, part of the glue in that midfield. He is a great player.
Yeah,
he's obviously very important for in terms of amount of ground he covers in midfield and in that box-to-box role.
Yeah,
but is he our most important player?
So, thanks for sending that in, Roast Cocoa Pops. It's a really good one, actually. Sarr is the player. So I'm going to say two things. Sarr is the player who I feel like we've noticed how much we've missed him when he's not been playing, actually. And that surprised me this season. But I think our most important player this season has been Vicario. If we still had Hugo Lloris in goal this season, we might be in 10th or 11th. Like the amount of, I'm not really massive into stats, but the XG conceded by Spurs is wild.
Yeah. And he's the best.
And Vicario has made some insane saves that Hugo would just not have got to. A lot of them he wasn't even big enough to get to. So I think in terms of where we are, 5th in the league at the moment, Vicario is very, very responsible for a lot of that.
Yeah, he's been really, really brilliant. I agree. He's made some unbelievable saves. In terms of our midfield, is Sarr, though, the player that we can least do without?
I think we don't have another player, especially with Bentancur coming back from his injury, who has the engine that Sarr has and the legs. But I think Maddison's more important. Because without Maddison, we just lack creativity, and it's very difficult.
Manny says...
I love Pat Matsar, by the way.
Yeah, Sarr's brilliant. I think he's been so great this season. Manny says, I love Ange, but in my opinion, Conte was very harshly treated by the fans. Yes, I agree he had some faults. However, he was not backed. The first 6 months were fantastic, but players who we had performing will always revert back to type.
This is a Manny from a Rome.
Conte was harshly treated by the fans. Look, in terms of, if you take the facts of the situation, when he got us 4th from 9th in that first 6 months, and when he was sacked, I believe we were 1 point off 3rd place going into in March. I think it was beginning of March or end of March.
Yeah, if we'd won that Southampton game, we were in 3rd.
We were in 3rd. So considering that, should he be seen as this massive failure?
Yes, because it was unwatchable. It was unwatchable. And the problem was, and it actually started pretty early on in his tenure, all of the pundits and all the media and all the fans, they all kind of come together and are like, well, and it happened under Jose as well. It's like, oh, well, this kind of football is fine when you're sneaking wins. But the moment it starts going awry, the dressing room will drop. The dressing room will not want to be with him anymore. And it happened just as they all said. All the pundits said it. And it's true. And the football was so unwatchable that sure, when you win a game, you're happy with it. But when you then go on a run of bad form and you don't win those games, it's horrible. And like I said, like I had a season ticket and I just didn't go. Like it was horrible. It was really boring. Now look, we all, I think, when Conte came, thought he was the right man. We all thought he was the right man. But the reality, when you say he wasn't backed, it's not as simple as it is at Chelsea, right? Because at Chelsea, they just go and cherry pick the best player in the world or one of the best players in the world and they pay them 300 grand a week and whatever. Well, Spurs aren't a club that's run like that. It doesn't work like that. So in terms of Conte being backed, Conte probably was frustrated because he couldn't get the players that he felt we needed, but he should have seen when he joined Spurs, we're never going to be able to get the same kind of players that he was able to get at Chelsea or even Juventus.
But if Conte had the backline that we have now, would it have been different? Van de Ven and Romero, or we had Romero, but like Van de Ven, Udogie, Porro instead of Dyer, Sanchez, Matt Doherty, you know, these kind of players.
You know, what in which case is it worth asking the question, why is Levy backing Ange for the kind of players he wants? And he wasn't, and he didn't get Bastoni over the line for Conte.
He got Longley instead.
And he got Longley instead. It's a difficult one. Look, I think we all wanted it to work out for Conte, but he was not suited to the football club. And
I think that's,
he actually ended up
right.
He actually ended up sacking himself pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, he had a bad look. Let's not also forget. Let's give him some credit. His mate died. He had a few deaths. A few friends died. His gallbladder exploded. You know. He had a bad year, but the football just wasn't very fun.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. But he does seem to be like get a lot of ire from the fans. Like he's seen as like this villain character. Like is that a fair characterization?
I think him and Jose actually, they never really cared about the club. Do you know what I mean? And you do kind of want your players and your manager to give a shit, and they didn't. And they were just like, you know, it was like,
that was probably
there was
thing,
a feeling of like them just collecting their money a little bit, you know.
They were doing us a favor to be here.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
that was
exactly
what people would say. Coy, come on you Spurs says, unpopular opinion, don't rely on Basuma as our 6. It's a bit of an elephant in the room about Basuma. The fact that he's now gone so long out of form. I know against Wolves wasn't so bad, but
I like him.
I like him as well. I think he's a really great player. But why has it been, you know, we haven't really seen his form since like October time. Yeah, I mean, like of that kind of form.
Been suspended for most of it.
Suspended, went to the AFCON, got malaria.
He dropped off a little bit after that second booking against Luton, that's for sure. And he's been suspended a lot. But I think if you get him playing with the best players at the club around him, so by which I mean, you know, not only alongside Sarr and Maddison in midfield, but also Porro and Destiny out wide. And when they're playing as the inverted, if you remember in that first 10 games, especially the Liverpool game as well, Basuma just playing these little 5 and 10 yard balls into Porro, into Udogie, getting it back, into Maddison, getting it back, playing little passes between them, bringing the opposition on. Once we have our best players around him, he'll show that he's the best 6 at the club, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think he showed what level he can play at the beginning of the season, and I think that was the kind of form he was showing for Brighton. And I don't know what it is recently. You know, you can put it down to confidence, you can put it down to one thing or another, but at the end of the day, he's not been showing it for a while. I don't think, but I agree, he's not been showing that form, but I don't think he's been like horrific like people make out. He just hasn't been as good as he was. Right. He hasn't hit that level, but he hasn't been like, he hasn't been playing awfully, but he hasn't been playing as well as he was. But that I can't really put my finger on why that performance level has dropped drastically compared to where it was and why he can't get back there. It just seems maybe it's a waiting game. Maybe in these last 13 games he'll get there. I'm hoping. Yeah. I wouldn't go to as far as say I don't want to trust him as our number 6 yet. I think we haven't hit that stage, but it's definitely a bit concerning. But look, that is the end of episode 3 of Unpopular Opinions. There'll be one more episode to come as well, so stay tuned, like, subscribe and comment, and as always, come on you Spurs.